Greetings, everyone, and welcome to day number 400, March the 30th, 2023. Kind of hard to believe we're here. I remember back when the war was just beginning, Jane and I were on together, and we were thinking maybe 3 days, maybe a week, 10 days. But here we are at day 400, and we are sticking to the task. I want to thank you for being here, continuing to support the community, like, share, tell your neighbors. Do everything you can do to help get the truth out. Tonight's video is fantastic. Lots of things to share of what is going on. Lots of translations, as I promised you. So, going to be good. Going to be good. Enjoy the chat, talking to each other, communicating. Lots of updates tonight. You know, I was thinking about it. It's really complicated with this war, especially with the Russian language, Ukrainian language. Now we see the influences of China and Iran. And those that are in the West, Europe, America, other nations, Spanish-speaking nations, know nothing other than what's told them through media without the direct translation. So once again, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our translation team, specifically Vladimir Zelensky there in Ukraine, who helps me tremendously with all of these things. And I encourage you guys, if you're not a part of our Patreon, consider joining it. This is what I use to bless these guys. It's $5 a month, but the group that is in there, we're talking nonstop. I drop videos there, other stuff that's not shown on the stream that I'm not allowed to show on YouTube. And it's just a great community. And at the same time, you're doing something to help those who are providing you with this information on a daily basis. I think it's only fair. So consider joining at patreon.com. It's in the description of YouTube Greg Terry Experience. So with all that, let's jump right in. Going to be a good night. Right now, heavy shelling from S-300s, which are actually ground-to-ground missiles converted by Russia, is ripping in the center of Kharkiv. They're also under shelling. I remind you that Kharkiv, very, very close to the Russian border. Additionally, drones, Shahed specifically, flying in from the north from Belarusian territory, are striking Kyiv right now and Sumy. Additionally, Kherson is also under intense fire. That's what's happening practically right now. Some of the things that have unfolded in the last day or so: Zaporozhye nuclear power plant has basically become a hopeless situation, according to Rafael Grossi. He, of course, is the representative of the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. He says there's just too many Russian troops here. They're continuing to bring in more troops. There is no way that we can establish a safe perimeter. There's too many weapons here, and that's it. I'm washing my hands, and I have to walk away from this right now. Hopefully, things will improve. So Zaporozhye nuclear power plant continues. Yes, it's on the back burner. You don't hear so much about it right now, but it continues to be a major, major issue that we need to pay attention to. Also, document dropped over the last 24 hours, edict, E-D-I-C-T, from the president, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, who says we're going to mobilize up to 400,000 more soldiers for this war in Ukraine and other activities we are engaged in around the world. But here's the interesting thing. Between April 1 and April 15, the number to hit, 147,000 new soldiers will be mobilized. That's basically over the next 2.5 weeks, folks. I want to jump over to Latvia tonight. These Baltic nations, I remind you, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they are dear friends of Ukraine. They're also dear friends of America and the West, and they have experienced life under the Soviet Union, and they do not want to go back. Latvia today making a bold statement. They approved legislation targeting specifically Russian document holders legally in the country. And I know it's going to seem goofy now. Well, they're targeting the Russian people that are there in Latvia. I understand, but this is a war. Latvia is an ally of Ukraine. Basically, the document states this, the legislation states this: if you are here on a pass, a residential document, and you are a Russian citizen, you must pass a Latvian language test. If you cannot pass the Latvian language test, then your documents will be forfeited. Wow. Let's jump over to the east now. China. A couple of things going on with China. First of all, it is completely obvious that Xi Jinping is putting China on a war stance. Of course, first of all, you have the Taiwan situation, and now you have their growing and budding relationship with Russia. 7.2% increase in defense budget for China coming right now. China is not playing, and the world must pay attention to this. We cannot sleep on this. If you do, you're in trouble. Additionally, soldiers that have been recovered, this would be Russian soldiers that have been eliminated there in the Bakhmut area, the Avdiivka area, and have been recovered by Ukrainians who returned them. They do, are wearing Chinese body armor. We've got the photos. We've got everything proven. The supplies are coming from China, and the signs are pointing more and more and more that China and Russia are going to cooperate on a new level. I want to jump back now to the foreign minister of Ukraine, Dmitry Kuleba. Kuleba coming out today and asking the world to please pause with the rhetoric. What do I mean by that? Zelensky came out yesterday, and I was talking to you on that stream from my eye doctor, that Zelensky says the Battle of Bakhmut is very, very important, and we're going to fight it until the end. In fact, in the Patreon, I'm going to drop a video here in the next few hours about the underground catacombs of Bakhmut that the Russian soldiers, Wagnerites, are using. It's unbelievable video that I received. I can't show it on YouTube, but I'm going to drop it there. It's about 4 minutes. I don't need to translate it. You just need to see it with your eyes. It's unbelievable what actually is happening in Bakhmut. And that is why it's so important. Zelensky says Bakhmut is vitally important. If we lose this, I'm afraid we're going to lose Western support, and Russia is going to gain more Iranian and Eastern support, such as China. This is a valuable piece of ground. There's nothing left there. I was at lunch with a friend of mine today, and he asked me, he goes, what does Bakhmut look like? I said, it looks like hell. It's destroyed completely. He says, well, what are they fighting for? I said, the dirt. Now it's become a moral place of victory that one side or the other can gain some momentum in this Battle of Bakhmut. It's very, very ugly. Well, Kuleba coming now 24 hours later, not referring only to Bakhmut, but he's talking about the coming spring offensive that all the other nations are talking about. The West, NATO, America. Yes, Ukraine is preparing a spring offensive, but they're smart enough not to tell what they're going to do. The world is trying to say what Ukraine is going to do. Kuleba came out and said, please stop telling us what we're going to do in our spring offensive, and that the war is determined by this spring offensive. Russia is here for the long term. Yes, we're going to push and do our best and fight. The weapons continue to come on this spring offensive, but this spring offensive will not determine the war. Do not tell us that if we lose this, then you're going to lose support from the West. We're doing our best. We're defending our homeland, and we're going to fight until the very last moment. Do not stand with us just for Bakhmut. Do not stand with us just for a spring offensive. Stand with us until victory. Remember the phrase I've told you and taught you. Do konca, until the very end. Stand with us until the very end, because we as Ukrainians, we will not quit. Probably if you were watching your news, you saw that the Wall Street journalist guy was taken into captivity there in Russia. Blinken coming out after that and warning American citizens, if you are in Russia, get out. We will not be able to protect you. And for that, I can absolutely guarantee that. There's no way that they would be able to protect that. I want to jump to one more key figure there in Kyiv. Of course, we have Volodymyr Zelensky, the president. We also have Kuleba, the foreign minister. We have Reznikov, the defense minister. We have Yermak on Zelensky's team. But another key guy, he is a spokesman for the office of president. His name is Podolyak, Mikhail Podolyak. He came out today making another statement. Folks, we're getting ready to see something happen in this war. The Bakhmut battle is going to end here in weeks. It can't continue. There's going to be a push one way or the other. Right now, Russia's gaining the ground, but Ukraine is holding. Additionally, Avdiivka, all these other places. So Podolyak coming out on top of what Kuleba said, and then that, of course, is on top of what Zelensky said yesterday. Podolyak says, when we win the war, remember spring offensive coming. Zelensky, our president, talked about Bakhmut. We're fighting for our 1991 borders. We're not just trying to hold on to what we have, give away Lugansk, give away parts of Donetsk region or all of it, give away Zaporozhye region, give away Kherson, give away Crimea. This and these places are Ukraine. Think about your own country, he said. Would you give away 6 states? You're just going to give away Florida and Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina? You're going to give it away? No, of course not. We're going to defend it until the very last inch. He's saying the same thing for us. But he went further. He says, not only do we want the 1991 borders, but we are living in a new world and a new world order. You're actually going to hear about that in a moment with the video we have translated. We not only want our 1991 borders, but we are going to fight for a 100-kilometer demilitarized zone. Told you guys about 6 weeks ago, this is what was coming. I was hearing it in Ukraine. Not only that border, but a demilitarized zone guarded or inspected by other nations. You're talking about stuff here that will just drive Russia insane, the Kremlin insane. Are you going to put us in a demilitarized zone? We're the second most powerful army in the world. You can't do that. This is what Ukraine is requiring. Well, he dropped one more level on that. He said, not only are we going to require our borders, which will include Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and Crimea, the 100-kilometer demilitarized zone, we're also going to require for international oversight over your nuclear program and your weapon stockpiles. That's the ultimate goal for Ukraine. Now, of course, this is a negotiating factor as Russia is pushed out of Ukraine. Of course, then the negotiations can happen and we begin. But this is where, on March 30th, 2023, Ukraine is standing very strong, saying, this is what we want. Now, we get to what I promised you last night, and that is why. Why is Ukraine so strong with their requirements when it seems right now that, as Blake said the other night, the war is a stalemate? Why are they so strong? Because you have to remember, Ukrainians understand the Russian language. They hear what comes out of the Kremlin every day. They know what they're fighting for. The world doesn't. Other than my site or journalist places you read, even other guys that are blogging, vlogging, YouTubing, whatever about this, I don't know how much translation they're doing. That's why I, share with others. Here, you're going to see and hear what the other side is saying. So Ukraine knows that's why they're so strong with their requirements and statements. Lavrov, foreign minister of Russia, for example, this is what he said about 36 hours ago when he was meeting with Iranian representatives there in Moscow, the Kremlin. Here's Lavrov. Check this out. And in general, the questions of how to stop this conflict should be addressed not to Iran, not to Russia, not to China, but to those Western figures, of course, to the Kyiv regime who daily, in different formats, say that now you cannot stop the war. You must continue pumping more weapons into Ukraine. And the last such speech was made by our colleague, Mr. Blinken, yesterday, maybe the day before, saying that a ceasefire now would be in the interest of the Russian Federation. And this cannot be allowed to happen. It's hard for me to say what this shallow analysis of his is based on. The only assumption, and we also exchange opinions on this today, is that the West does not want to stop the war. It sees in this war its own geopolitical interest, primarily in terms of its attempts to eliminate another competitor on the world stage in the person of the Russian Federation. Could you imagine? That's what you're hearing every day if you're a Russian speaker. That's not Solovyov. That's Lavrov. The West doesn't want to end this war. They want it to keep going and going and going. This is unacceptable. We're not going to permit this. The Kyiv regime is pumped up by the West. Folks, we're in 1978 Cold War. Might as well be 1984 all over again. Unfortunately, it's not just a Cold War, but there's a hot war, and it's happening inside Ukrainian sovereign territory. So this actually is even worse. So when you wonder, why is Ukraine so bold with all these statements? Why is Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and Poland so bold with all their statements? You know, it's just Ukraine, da-da-da-da. They're seeing this every day. These guys in Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they also can understand, many of them, the Russian language, and they hear it. That's Lavrov, foreign minister, spewing that. Now, how about take it a step further? We know right now, Israel, Iran, Syria, Turkey, it's an absolute disaster. Now the United States getting mixed up right in the middle of it with where our allegiances lie. The foreign policy of America is an absolute disaster. And I don't agree with anything that Lavrov says, but one thing he did say was quite correct, and that was that the analysis coming out of Washington, D.C. is shallow. 100% agree with that. Many of these guys that are speaking for America have no concept of the culture and the history and the ramifications of what Russia is doing, what is happening to Ukraine, and what is happening in the Middle East. They rely on their advisors and those talking in their ears, but personally, they know nothing about these cultures, and Russia's calling them out. He says, your understanding of this is so shallow. With that, Mr. Lavrov, I actually agree with you, unfortunately. Israel, a mess. Iran, a mess. But Iran, they're not in Washington, D.C. talking. They're actually in Moscow having meetings with the Kremlin. I promised you some translation here. Here is the Iranian representative. Just listen to these words. Well, also representatives of the Ukraine said that we are ready at our level of president, at the level of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, to continue efforts to establish peace and calm in this war. We hope for sure that those kind of results will be achieved, but the fact that Ukraine is being armed with different weapons and that these weapons are coming from the West, well, of course, this complicates the situation. We as Iran will always believe that, of course, it's necessary to rely on political settlements of issues, and we will welcome any initiative and proposals that will help to lift these problems and these issues. But the fact remains. But the fact remains. Where was this guy? He was in Moscow, meeting with Lavrov. You hear what they're saying. It's that same story. And honestly, you can put China right there with them. It's the West. It's the West. It's the United States. It's NATO. It's Europe. There is a new world order coming. There is a power shift from Washington and London, and it's coming to Moscow and Tehran and Beijing. And the world may as well accept it, and it's going to happen through this war in Ukraine and the unrest of what is happening in the Middle East. This is what these guys are saying. My friends, I bring it back to the war in Ukraine right now. This is why they're so assertive. This is why many times people get angry. Why does Zelensky keep asking for weapons? Or the conspiracy theories run wild, which are all lies. Oh, he has $200 billion in the Canary Islands hidden away. He's the Antichrist. Come on. To even mutter these things shows your level of intelligence. I got news for you. He's a man who was an actor brought to the scene for such a time as this, trying to defend his homeland. He's doing a good job. He's not only having to fight Russia, he's having to fight the internal corruption inside Ukraine. I'll call it like it is. It has been corrupt. So is every other nation on the planet. We fight against corruption. We fight for good. He's also fighting against the rhetoric of the world over and over and over being repeated. We're now at day 400. Unbelievable. This is why Ukrainians, Zelensky, Podolyak, Kuleba, Reznikov are always saying, please send us weapons. You do not understand, evidently, what we're fighting for. Because if you did, you would be here and help us end this immediately before it goes to the next level. They're right, folks. It's very ugly. With that said, I'm going to bring you one more video tonight about good and evil. It's coming directly out of the propaganda machine there in Moscow. Folks, I know where you're sitting tonight, wherever you're at, United States, Europe, Australia, South America, Mexico. You're sitting there and you're going, we're good. And I mean, not good versus evil. We're good. We believe in the right things. We believe in the right values. We stand for the truth. Well, on the other side of that iron curtain, they believe the same thing. We are good. We stand for the truth. They stand for evil. And it is a war that is happening right now. And it's growing day by day by day. Here's a little bit of that rhetoric coming out of the propaganda machine. I want to show you this, and this will help you understand why on day 400, Ukraine is so strong and pressing for their requirements for the war, the need for weapons, and the need to physically win this war. Check this piece. Certainly, when we observe this global confrontation that is developing today, listen, we're not just talking about, the commonplace notion of a new world order. We are talking about global meanings. We're talking about the movement of human civilization in the future, and must be guided by common sense, historical conditions, and historical traditions of our country. We perfectly today understand that this is a confrontation between good and evil. Good is basic human values. Good is family, which is a union only between a man and a woman. It is the free choice of one's future. And evil is the conglomerate of Western countries who, with what they're doing now, trying to usurp everyone's right to be strong and to impose development scenarios that will cause suffering and misery for hundreds of millions of people who will be drawing the Western culture. There you have it. That's the story. Good and evil. We're right. You're wrong. From our side, we're right. You're wrong. What happens? There's not enough quality leadership in the world to process through this at the highest levels. It's a tragedy. And because of that tragedy, we end up with a war in Ukraine, a brewing war potential in the Middle East, and a tragedy for people who are caught in the middle. That's where we're at, folks. Day 400. I hope that helps you understand some of the pleas, some of the cries, some of the calling here as We get to a place we never thought we would have gotten to. Tomorrow will be day 401. Thank you, folks. Hope you enjoyed the translations, the explanation, the analysis, and the update. So we wish you a good night here on day 400, March 30th, 2023. We'll see you tomorrow in 23 hours. You guys be blessed and have a good evening. Good night.